Welcome, dear friends, to a story of love, betrayal, and redemption in Silicon Valley. Enjoy the story! Jessica Carter, the 32-year-old heiress to Carter Technologies, one of Silicon Valley's most successful startups, found herself staring out the window of her corner office, lost in thought. The San Francisco skyline sparkled in the distance, but Jessica's mind was far from the breathtaking view. "Something's not right," she muttered to herself, twirling a strand of her chestnut hair around her finger. How did I fall for Brian so quickly? Her whirlwind romance with Brian Matthews, a charming venture capitalist she'd met just 2 months ago, had taken everyone by surprise, including Jessica herself. Now, with their wedding just weeks away, a nagging doubt was gnawing at her. The buzz of her intercom jolted her from her reverie. "Miss Carter, your sister Tiffany is on line 1. She says it's urgent." Jessica sighed, bracing herself for the conversation ahead. "Put her through, Linda." "Jessie, darling." Tiffany's voice dripped with false sweetness. "How's my favorite big sister?" "Tiffany, I've asked you not to call me that," Jessica replied, pinching the bridge of her nose. "What do you need?" "Oh, don't be such a killjoy. Can't a girl just call to chat with her sister?" "We both know that's not why you're calling. What is it this time?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Fine. I need money." Jessica's jaw clenched. "Again? Tiffany, you get a generous monthly allowance from Dad's trust. What happened to that?" "It's not enough," Tiffany whined. "You're living it up in your penthouse running Daddy's company while I'm scraping by." "Scraping by? In a luxury condo with a 6-figure allowance?" Jessica scoffed. "Tiffany, you need to grow up and take some responsibility for your life." "Oh, that's rich coming from you," Tiffany sneered. "You've had everything handed to you on a silver platter." "I'm Daddy's daughter too, you know. I deserve my share." Jessica's patience was wearing thin. "We've been through this, Tiffany. Dad left the company to me because I worked for it. I've been here since I graduated college, learning every aspect of the business. You've never shown any interest beyond what you can spend." "Whatever helps you sleep at night, sis," Tiffany spat. "Just remember, karma's a bitch. Your perfect little world might come crashing down sooner than you think." The line went dead, leaving Jessica staring at the phone in disbelief. She slumped back in her chair, a mix of anger and sadness washing over her. "Oh, Dad," she whispered to the empty office. "What a mess you left behind." That evening, Jessica found herself curled up on her plush sofa, a glass of wine in hand, mindlessly flipping through channels on her giant flat-screen TV. She paused on a soap opera, drawn in by a plot that eerily mirrored her own life. A wealthy heiress, a penniless fiancé. What are the odds? She mused, taking a sip of her Cabernet. As the melodrama unfolded, a spark of an idea began to form in Jessica's mind. She reached for her phone, scrolling through her contacts until she found the name she was looking for. "Hey, Mike, it's Jess. I know it's late, but I need your help with something crazy." Dr. Michael Chen, Jessica's childhood friend, and now a successful neurologist, listened intently as she outlined her plan. "Let me get this straight," Mike said, a note of amusement in his voice. "You want to fake a life-threatening illness to test your fiancé's loyalty?" "I know it sounds insane," Jessica admitted, "but something doesn't feel right about Brian. I need to know if he truly loves me or if he's after my money." Mike chuckled. "Well, I've always said you tech moguls have a flair for the dramatic. All right, I'm in. When do we start this little soap opera of yours?" "Tomorrow morning," Jessica replied, a mix of excitement and nervousness bubbling in her chest. "Let's see what Brian Matthews is really made of." The next morning, a sleek ambulance pulled up to Jessica's penthouse. As planned, Brian was just arriving for their usual breakfast date when he saw the commotion. Jessica!" Brian called out, his handsome face etched with concern as he watched paramedics wheel out a stretcher. Jessica lay still, her eyes closed, as she was loaded into the ambulance. She could hear Brian's panicked voice in the background. "What's happening? Is she okay?" "Sir, are you family?" one of the paramedics asked. "I'm her fiancé," Brian replied. "Please, tell me what's going on." "We're taking her to San Francisco General. You can meet us there." As the ambulance pulled away, Jessica cracked open an eye to see Brian standing on the sidewalk, phone in hand. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but the expression on his face was unreadable. At the hospital, Mike took charge of the charade, briefing Jessica on her condition as they set up a private room. "Remember," he whispered, "you're suffering from a rare autoimmune disorder. It's serious, but there's a chance for a recovery with extensive treatment." Jessica nodded, her heart racing as she heard Brian's voice in the hallway. "I'm here to see Jessica Carter," he was saying to a nurse. "I'm her fiancé." Mike stepped out to intercept him. "Mr. Matthews? I'm Dr. Chen, Jessica's primary physician. Can we talk for a moment?" Jessica strained to hear their conversation, but could only make out muffled voices. After what felt like an eternity, the door opened, and Brian entered, his face pale. "Oh, Jess," he breathed, rushing to her bedside. "Baby, why didn't you tell me you were sick?" Jessica mustered her best weak smile. I didn't want to worry you," she whispered. Brian took her hand, but Jessica couldn't help noticing how his eyes darted around the luxurious private room. "The doctor says it's serious, but you're going to be okay, right? We have the wedding to think about." "I don't know, Brian," Jessica replied, watching his reaction closely. "Dr. Chen says the treatment could take months, maybe even a year, and there's no guarantee." She let her voice trail off, observing as a flicker of something, was it concern or annoyance, crossed Brian's face. "A year?" he repeated, his voice strained. "But what about the company? Your sister?" Jessica frowned. "Why are you worried about Tiffany?" Brian backpedaled quickly. "I just meant, well, she'll be worried about you, won't she? Family is important at times like these." As Brian continued to ramble about treatment options and how they'd get through this together, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. Over the next few weeks, Jessica's suspicions grew. Brian's visits became less frequent, and when he did come, he seemed distracted, often stepping out to take phone calls. One evening, as Jessica pretended to be asleep, she overheard a conversation that chilled her to the bone. "Tiff, baby, I'm working on it," Brian was whispering urgently into his phone. "No, I can't just ask her to change her will now. We need to be patient." Jessica's heart raced as she listened, forcing herself to remain still. I know, Brian continued. "But think about it. Once we're married, it'll all be ours anyway. Just a little longer, okay? I love you." As Brian ended the call and slipped back into the room, Jessica fought to keep her breathing steady. Her mind was reeling. Brian and Tiffany, together, planning to take everything she had worked for? The next morning, Jessica called Mike. "We need to end this," she said, her voice shaking. "I've heard enough." Mike arrived at the hospital, concern etched on his face. "Jess, what happened? What did you hear?" Jessica recounted the overheard conversation, tears streaming down her face. "I was such a fool, Mike. How could I have fallen for this?" Mike sat on the edge of her bed, taking her hand in his. "Hey, you're not a fool. You're one of the smartest people I know. These things, they happen to the best of us." "What do I do now?" Jessica asked, feeling more lost than she ever had in her life. Mike squeezed her hand. "We gather evidence, and we make sure they both pay for what they've done." With Mike's help, Jessica set up hidden cameras and microphones in her hospital room. They waited, knowing it was only a matter of time before Brian or Tiffany made their move. It happened 3 days later. Brian entered the room, looking nervous. "Hey, Jess," he said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "How are you feeling today?" "Tired," Jessica murmured, playing her part. "The doctors say there hasn't been much improvement." Brian nodded, his eyes darting to the IV drip beside her bed. "Listen, babe, I've been doing some research. I found this new treatment that might help. It's experimental, but—" He pulled out a small vial from his pocket. "If we add this to your IV, it could speed up your recovery." Jessica's heart pounded. This was it. "I don't know, Brian. Shouldn't we ask Dr. Chen first?" "No," Brian said quickly, then forced a smile. "I mean, we don't want to get his hopes up if it doesn't work, right? Let's just try it and see." As Brian reached for her IV, the door burst open. Mike entered, flanked by 2 police officers. "Step away from that IV, Mr. Matthews," Mike commanded. Brian froze, the vial still in his hand. "What's going on here?" Jessica sat up, all pretense of illness gone. "Game over, Brian. We know everything." The color drained from Brian's face as he realized he'd been caught. The officers moved in, reading him his rights as they handcuffed him. "You don't understand," Brian pleaded as he was led away. "It was all Tiffany's idea. She made me do it." Jessica watched him go, a mix of sadness and relief washing over her. "I think I understand perfectly," she said softly. The trial was a media circus. Jessica, the tech heiress, betrayed by her gold-digging fiancé and her own sister. The tabloids couldn't get enough of it. In the courtroom, Jessica sat stoically as Brian and Tiffany turned on each other, each trying to pin the blame on the other. "It was all her idea," Brian shouted, pointing at Tiffany. "She's been jealous of Jessica for years." "Oh, please," Tiffany scoffed. "You were the one who came up with the plan to marry her for her money?" As the accusations flew back and forth, Jessica caught Mike's eye in the gallery. He gave her a reassuring nod, and for the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope. In the end, both Brian and Tiffany were found guilty of attempted murder and conspiracy. As they were led away in handcuffs, Jessica felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for a statement. Jessica took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and faced the sea of cameras. "Justice has been served today," she said, her voice strong and clear. "But this isn't just about me. It's about standing up to those who would exploit others for their own gain. It's about—" She faltered for a moment, overwhelmed by emotion. Suddenly she felt a warm hand slip into hers. Mike was there, standing by her side, offering silent support. With renewed confidence, Jessica continued. "It's about remembering that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the genuine connections we make with others. Thank you." As they walked away from the courthouse, Mike squeezed her hand. "You did it, Jess. It's over." Jessica looked up at him, really seeing him for the first time in years. "No," she said softly. "I think it's just beginning." 1 year later, the Carter Technologies office was buzzing with excitement. Employees gathered around TV screens, watching as their CEO, Jessica Carter, rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. "Carter Technologies is proud to announce the launch of our new charitable foundation," Jessica was saying, her face beaming. "Dedicated to supporting victims of fraud and providing education on financial literacy." In the crowd, Dr. Michael Chen watched with pride as his wife addressed the nation. Their whirlwind romance, sparked in the aftermath of betrayal, had taken everyone by surprise, including themselves. As Jessica stepped down from the podium, she was approached by a reporter. "Miss Carter, there are rumors that your sister Tiffany has been released from prison. Any comment?" Jessica's smile didn't falter. "I believe in second chances," she said diplomatically. "The foundation's doors are open to anyone truly seeking to turn their life around." Later that evening, as Jessica and Mike strolled hand in hand through Central Park, she couldn't help but marvel at how much her life had changed. "Penny for your thoughts?" Mike asked, nudging her gently. Jessica smiled up at him. "I was just thinking, isn't it funny how the worst moments in our lives can sometimes lead us to the best?" Mike pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Well, in that case, remind me to send Brian and Tiffany a thank you note." Jessica laughed, the sound echoing through the park. As they continued their walk, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The drama, the betrayal, the pain, it had all led her here, to this moment, with the person who had been by her side all along. And for the first time in her life, Jessica Carter knew without a doubt that she was exactly where she was meant to be.